This is the Impressions Xchange podcast.
Impressions Xchange podcast,
where all topics impacting the graphic imaging and printing industry are addressed via in-depth news coverage, analysis, and timely interviews inside the commercial, packaging, wide format, and in-plant communities.
Hi, this is Dan Marks with Printing United Alliance. I'm happy to be talking today with Jim Raffel. Jim, welcome.
Hello, Dan. Thank you. And glad to be here.
Yep. Can you tell us sort of briefly about your background, your current business, and how you came to look into some of these paperless production systems?
Sure. Well, I've been doing primarily color verification and color process control systems for the last 25 or so years. I have a company called Colormetrics that develops software, actually, and then we spun a consulting practice out of that several years ago called ColorCasters. And through ColorCasters consulting, we've worked with clients who are processing files in an automated way, and then having color problems that result from that, because nobody's ever, it's a lights out type operation, and nobody's looking at the file. It gets printed, and people aren't satisfied with the color. So it made me want to understand those types of systems a little more clearly.
Okay. Now, I know that online shopping has certainly changed the way many things operate today, and the purchasing of print is no different. Can you elaborate sort of on this new reality?
Sure. I mean, if you want to talk about like the current landscape, depending who you believe or who you listen to, about 12 to 18% of all print is going to be purchased online now, and that's a big chunk of that's going through your major players like your VistaPrint, BuildASign, Signs.com, people like that. Mm-hmm. And I think that percentage is going to continue to increase, just as it did in the photo processing world about 2 decades ago. So you've got basically online systems that are at least partially paperless, and that's again how I got into this. I worked with a photo studio that had one like that, or photo processor. Okay. And then the customer buys in that online portal, and then hopefully there's a back end system running some kind of an ERP system that handles the manufacturing piece of it.
Okay. Let's just take a quick moment to kind of define specifically what the boundaries are when we're talking about paperless production systems for this discussion. Are we talking about the graphics segment? What are the boundaries there?
Yeah, I mean, it can be anything, actually. I mean, it's anything related to the job, right? So, I mean, I guess when you say graphic, as long as you're including things like size, trim marks, any finishing that's done afterwards, the actual printing part, all of that, right? And that's managed. That's managed generally through these 2 types of systems. The front end, which is that's going to be a portal where the client actually, people think about that as web to print, right? So they go to the website and they buy something, and then it gets delivered, and that might be something pre-designed or something where they can upload a custom design. And then the back end, which I talked about, the ERP, that's kind of your automated pre-press, your automated shop floor reporting, your built-in quality verification, hopefully, and then some kind of 10,000 foot view dashboard style reporting systems. Is that where you were going with that?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, let's go ahead and elaborate on that. Really, let's talk about this front end. Can you describe for us kind of the traits of both the portal and the web to print functionality? What might they consist of?
Sure. So when we talk about the front end or the portal, a lot of these are B2B focused, right? And that would have more of a closed style front end. And what I mean by that is that it's more than just orders and designs and shipping and tracking, which you would get with like a VistaPrint or someone like that. It includes things like project management, maybe event management. It's essentially a complete ecosystem that's designed and managed. It designs and manages something from start to finish, and that something could be a trade show booth. It could be an environmental space like a bank lobby or something like that. So it manages the entire project, not just the graphics. And so what it does is it creates a relatively high barrier to entry for anyone else who wants to try and steal that business away from you. And what it also does is it hopefully creates a standalone profit center, because if you're the creator of that, while you may do something like the graphics, you may not do the actual interior design work, but you maybe get somehow the interior design company to start subscribing to your service so that they can utilize it not just with the clients that you have in common, but maybe other clients. And then hopefully what that does is maybe encourages those other clients of the architectural design firm to start using you for the print services.
Okay. And then the back end of these systems, how would you best describe those?
Well, the back end is a little more complicated. So when you start getting into the back end, it's more it's all of those complex pieces that interface with everything else you do, right? So do you have a Dyleem system? Do you have any one of these other number of graphics centric systems, and how do you interface to those and all the different modules that go with that, right? And how do you automate your pre-press? Which workflow tool are you going to use to automate your pre-press? And then really the question becomes, are you going to buy that, or are you going to build it?
Okay. Yeah, let's take a little time to talk about that. I know for graphics companies entering this space, there definitely is a key decision, as you mentioned, between purchasing a system or building it from the ground up. So I know you reached out to a number of different providers to learn about what they were doing and get a sense of what their systems were. What did you find out in that search?
Well, I found out that on the buy it side, but yeah, let's start actually with the buy it side, because if we talk about the buy it side, we can contrast it with the build it side, right?
Yep.
If you're going to build this, it's going to cost you millions of dollars, right? Between 1 and 12 million is the numbers I heard. So if you buy it, it's not going to cost that much. They're typically, if you buy, you're typically going to end up with a modular system, and the modules will integrate with each other. If you build your own, while you may build it in a modular way, your modules may not cleanly integrate with each other. And I heard some stories of that, because it gets built over a matter of years. You might start with a small team of 2 or 3 developers and end up with a team of 25 developers, and things change. And there was never a roadmap, right? And then when you buy it, you have to make sure that there is some customization that's available. That is one of the huge advantages of building it. You can make it do and look like whatever you want it to, right?
Sure. Right.
And if you buy, you're going to be required to change the way you do some things. Now, that's not always a bad thing, because a lot of times the systems you buy are built on best practices across many companies that may have had input into the design. But you have to be willing to be open to that. And if you think that your systems and your process are really what gives you a huge competitive advantage, then maybe you do need to build, right? And the other thing is that both these take time to implement, but it takes a lot less time than if you're going to build one all on your own.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting, that concept that implementing the system can actually help companies eliminate maybe some inefficiencies they have in their workflow. But as you said, they have to be willing to do that and to make the change and go there.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. And then let's say the flip side of this. Can you talk briefly about what you learned about the ones that are custom built, that companies built from the ground up? And as you said, they could specify what they want, but it's a long task.
Yeah, and so just circling back, it is a lot of money. I really want to emphasize that piece, because the people who talked about buying were in like the $500,000 range, which is a lot of money, but it's a different scale than starting at 1 million and going up to one company that invested $12 million, right? And
Yeah.
so when you build it, it does require you that you create these integrations between your systems and then those that you may buy or use. And what does that mean? That's going to be things like workflow systems that maybe you don't want to build, switch and things like that, right? But there has to be integration, and you have to support these development costs spread over a base of 1. So you may get into and coming from the software business, I get this, right? I've done custom work for clients, and you go in with a quote, and it's going to be $8,000, and when you're done, it's $80,000, and everyone's like, well, what happened? It's like, well, you wanted more than you originally told us, and we can't resell this to 10 other people. It's just you, so you've got to pay the whole bill. And so by definition, literally everything is a customization. But you don't have to change as much. We compared and contrasted on the last one. And the other thing is it's typically a long but continuous implementation. And so that can be both a good thing and a bad thing. I like to actually go back to Jason Fried, who founded a company called 37 Signals. And many people know them as the creators of something called Basecamp. He wrote a book called Rework. And what he likes to say is that you can create a kick-ass half instead of buying what might be a half-assed whole. And so what he means by that is the pieces that you really need, you build exactly to your specification to do exactly what you need. The other things that you maybe bolt on, maybe they don't have to be top of the line, the very, very best. You don't necessarily need, platinum coded accounting systems if the numbers and the money are taking care of themselves. But you probably do need a website that draws people in and is easy to use, right? And so that's where you have to focus the efforts of your developers. And those are the really hard decisions that you have to make when you're building your own system.
Okay. And then can you give any examples, maybe not naming names, but of, let's say, sort of challenges companies ran into with both custom built and sort of homegrown systems?
Yeah, let me just think off the top of my head here. So some of the real challenges when they grew their own was the size of the staff. I mean, one of the guys I talked to, I think, if I remember the numbers right, he had like 25 or 30 developers, full time, both both here and a few of them overseas. But managing and making sure that you can pay that, right? That's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And then some of the things that in the same guy told me, some of the things that are kind of standard and off the shelf in the buy systems, like RFID tracking of jobs and pallets and things like that through your shop. That's not easy stuff if you're going to build it yourself, right? And just any of the integrations with some of the third-party systems, again, like I keep saying, Switch and workflow tools like that, connecting to their APIs and writing code that does that automatic connection can be painfully frustrating. Basically, is what it comes down to.
Sure.
And on the oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, and on the buy side, it's just I think the biggest thing is the implementation time. Even though it ultimately takes longer to implement your own custom system, the big frustration I heard from the guys who had bought systems is that they bought it and they thought, okay, we bought it in January. They said they're going to install it in March, and okay, so maybe by June we're up and running.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was talking to these guys, it was a year later, and they were just getting running, because there is just so much that has to be done to make it fit your system. Now, did they maybe get to recognize some of the benefits along that year? Yeah, but the getting 80% of the jobs through the system in an through the shop in an automated way, that took a year or more to get to, right? And so if you're buying it now and expecting to have the return on investment be in this calendar year or even the next, that may be incredibly optimistic, even though that's what the software guy is telling you.
Okay. And the reason that it takes longer is just the inherent complexity of the processes, or all the work it takes to really integrate it into the workflow. What is that stumbling block?
Well, one of the big stumbling blocks was not invented here, right? And so it's the people problem, right? So you need, in both situations, you need people who are willing to change. And that both the two biggest, actually all three of the big companies I talked to who have done this, or four, every one of them came back to, there were just certain people we had to say goodbye to, because they couldn't wrap their head around the fact that we were going to be doing things a different way. Even though we had gotten to where we were and we were successful by doing things that way, as owners and managers and visionaries of the companies, we knew that we had to go a different direction and grow. And that fighting that was really the biggest obstacle, both in the buy and the build, in both sides.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that is the price of taking a business to a next level, is you need to sort of redefine who you're serving, how you're serving them, and some may not stay with you. Let's
Absolutely.
take a little time now, I guess, to discuss quality. When we think about
Mhm.
printing, the go-to is often color, and I know you work deeply in color, but it goes deeper than that. So, how should companies approach or ensure quality when they get involved with these systems, and what are some potential quality pitfalls?
Sure. And the cool thing is, I don't know if it's cool or not. This is we're basing this podcast on a presentation, obviously, that I did at Spire back in February, I think, and it wasn't a month later that we were in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis,
Yes.
and so all of a sudden we had to pivot our own business, and so during that presentation I talked about how color is just one aspect of quality, but that you have to pay attention to all the aspects of quality and automate it to the greatest extent you can. And I found myself, you know, with the help of my team, creating gator style face coverings and a couple other different dye sublimation products in
Hmm.
my basement lab for the last few months. And as we talk, I'm actually back out on the road doing consulting for the first time in 3 months. So
Yay.
it's almost ironic that a bunch of the things I talked about in that talk I got to experience firsthand not a month later, as
Sure.
as we went from just having a fun lab to production. So um and so that what I kept all of these things really close to my thinking as we built that out. And the big one is it's an Amazon world, right? If you start right there, you realize that's kind of your challenge. And if it's an Amazon world, what does that mean? It means that Amazon is coming close to instant gratification for pretty much your every want and need. And they even in the middle of this COVID thing, where a lot of companies struggled and they had to change their delivery structures for a very short period of time,
Hmm.
they rose to the challenge, right? And so that raises the bar for everybody else. And they kept delivery free if you were a Prime member.
Sure.
You could still get some things in the same day. They did all of these things, right? And they've got these phenomenal customer reviews that you can use, and you can ask other customers questions. So how do you compete with that? Well, one of the things you do is you have to focus on what's most important to your customers. And so I used the color example, and I went through a couple of research studies, and the long and short of those studies was that what are the top problems? And the one I focused on was matching color between different devices. So what does that mean? Well,
Hmm.
it means if I'm doing trade show booths, which hopefully everyone will be doing again here in several months, um, does the carpet match the hard surfaces and the soft signage? Because it could and it should,
Sure.
right? And so that was a huge concern for people, right? And so how do you measure that? How do you control that?
Hmm.
um, that's our job, because the designers, they just want what they want in that booth, right? Our job is, and it's not that they don't necessarily care about things like Delta E, they just don't want to hear those words, and they don't want to see our charts and graphs. They just want what they want.
Yeah.
And that's the same. That's color. But what about trade show booth? Now a lot of our listeners have probably pivoted to making plexiglass barriers and things like that. What are the manufacturing tolerances on those, right? I mean, how exacting do you have to be if you're going to mount that someplace, and you're going to go measure and then you're going to mount? Well, your measurements have to be very precise, and then you have to double check everything probably before you deliver it, right? And how are you going to control all of that? Is it the right thickness of plexiglass? Did we measure it just right? Did we cut it just right? Do we have the supports in the right places? Because the key is you want to do those things right the first time.
Yes.
And then as a manager or an owner, you're going to want some kind of a dashboard view. And everyone loves dashboards. All that means is it's the highest level, right? So we had 100 plexiglass pieces go through, and 98% of them were perfect.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, the 2% that weren't went to our biggest customer, and they're not very happy. You got to be able to get that to a dashboard so that as an owner you can say, how do we fix this? Because a lot of times 2% on a product that's brand new we would accept, but unfortunately the 2% we botched on were the most important ones. And that's where these dashboards come in, is to help you focus on where those problems are occurring.
Right. And I get what you're saying about, I think one of the things that we bring to the table that, let's say, Amazon can't is that we manage complexity. And when you talk about the trade show display matching the floor graphics matching the brochures that are on the table, all of that stuff. And the Amazon thing is kind of more of a one-off, and when you buy bunch of one-offs, the odds are they're not going to match. So is that one of the sort of key value adds that companies in our industry can bring to the fore?
Yeah, I mean, I actually hadn't thought about that aspect of it, because when I was thinking about Amazon, when you said one off, I'm like, well, their consistent delivery is not one off. But you're right. If I bought I don't know, a bunch of uh, picture frames from them, and they were going all over my house.
Yeah.
If those picture frames had a big, if they had even a significant Delta E shift, but one's in the living room and the other two are in two different bedrooms, I'm never going to notice. Whereas you're right, when we're manufacturing, because really a lot of people in the Printing United family um, manufacture for environmental spaces, whether that be a trade show booth, a fast food restaurant, a bank lobby, whatever it might be. And you're right, it's the trick of delivering all the components that you're responsible for, because there might be some coming from other people, but at least all the components in that space that you're responsible for, delivering those not only with the right fit and finish, but the right color.
Mm-hmm.
I just worked with a client last week. They were trying to match a certain gray that's going in a lobby of a bank, and they were trying to do it on a roll fed UV printer, right? And so they had to be within 1 delta E of I think it was a Sherwin-Williams, someone's paint color. And so
Okay.
they had this paint on the surface, and we measured that with a spectrophotometer, and we, through a bunch of color management stuff, we got this thing producing within 1 delta E, and they were able to take that to their customer and get it approved, right? And that was a huge thing to them, because they're a very big company with thousands of branches, and they want them to all look the same when people walk in. Yeah. And so that is a big advantage we have,
Yeah,
if we
just
can deliver it.
right. From a personal standpoint, I ordered several parts and pieces for a little home project I was working on, and I was sort of banking on the fact that they would all be compatible with each other, but it was a little uncertain. And it was inexpensive, it was quick, and I sort of thought, well, if it doesn't work out, then I'll go back to the drawing board. But obviously, when you get to the big jobs and you're banking, you know, many dollars on success at a trade show, to continue with that example, you need everything to work, and it's not cheap, and it's not fast, but it needs to be right. Do you agree with that?
Well, right. And the thing I would add to that is you get one chance, right? The show runs for 3 days, right? Let's take the Printing United example. In October, we're going to be there for 3 days.
Mhm.
So if someone in our, one of our members is building a booth, and they're doing setup 3 days before everyone gets there, and they realize something's not right, they have 3 days to fix it. This isn't something where it's like a bank lobby where, if you might have 7 to 10 days because it's new construction or whatever.
Mhm.
You have 3 days, and I remember at Spire, one of the people got up and talked about how they grab their sewing machine. That's why they put their locations where they are. They'll grab their sewing machines, put them in the truck, and take them right to the show floor to fix things that aren't right. Yeah, and I think that's important. I think that's something we absolutely bring to the table, because there's a lot of money involved, and you get one chance to get it right.
Absolutely. Um, uh, Among questions to ask, I find that why is always a good one to ask. So, why should a company get started with these types of paperless systems? And can you describe a company that might be ready to do that? And what are the competitive advantages, briefly?
A company that so I'm describing not a specific company, what a company looks like that's ready.
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
yeah.
So I think you're ready. Let's start with that. I I I think you're ready when you're through, let's just call it the raw startup, right? So what does the raw startup look like? Well, sort of having just experienced it, it's getting your first production line up and running, and as you're doing that, realizing that, if when the orders came in, it could automatically queue them
Hmm.
into the RIP, and then if the RIP could just basically fire jobs off at 11 at night and be ready when I come in at 7 in the morning. The printer would go roll to roll, and at 7 in the morning, everything would just be sitting there waiting for me.
Right.
And then then the next step is, oh, well, yeah, everything was there waiting, but wouldn't it have been cool if there was a barcode or a job indicator on there so that I could go back to a screen, not a piece of paper. I could go back to a screen and say, oh, this is job number such and such. Okay, click. And it prints the shipping label, we pack it up and we ship it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you get there slowly. And when your volume is such that, one or two people can handle it and you're making you're making significant money, that's great. But what I've seen happen to clients is they grow literally beyond where you can do it with one or two people. And all of a sudden you have 5 people and they're tripping over each other. And what 2 people could communicate very well together doesn't work anymore because there is no process. It was just, you figure out it was 2 guys just communicating and working well together. And I think that's when you're ready. When you realize that you had a process that worked with 2 people, but it's not working with 6. So you got to take a look at the whole thing, and you got to figure out a way to systemize everything. And, one of the people we interviewed talked about only 80% of the jobs probably fitting in a fully automated system. I would hope that you can get it to 90 or 95, or maybe you shouldn't be taking the other 20%. That's the other side of that argument.
Sure.
And when you finally get there, though, I think what can happen is you can have some real cost savings through that automation, and it would allow you to become the low cost producer. And that's what I guess there were 3 study participants, and that's what all of them told me, right? Is that their drive to do this was to become the low cost producer. That doesn't mean they're a low cost seller. They wanted to be the low cost producer. One of them, the reason was just because of the state they operate in. Their costs to operate are very high because of things like rent, regulation, labor, things like that. But they didn't want to move from where they are. So they wanted to find other ways to become the low cost producer. Well, you're kind of left with automation. And so that was their why. That's why they had to do it. The other thing is that one of them had been through this whole photo thing and realized that only a very few people survived when that was over. Now, as he likes to say, those people are flying around on private jets now because they automated everything and they became the low cost producer and also high quality producers because you have to have all of them at some point. Some of the people I talk to, what they're able to do because they do all of this and because of their efficiency and because they're a low cost producer, they can do things like include free shipping on everything.
Right.
One of them included free design services. I'm like, what? Free design services? Yep. Doesn't matter how small your order is, they will help you with design. And not like automated design, like an actual designer sitting at a computer coming up with something for you, which was kind of cool. And then, for the ones who build their own, it becomes access to a unique one-of-a-kind portal. And, what does that mean? It means that if you build something that people really like, they're going to keep coming back because you're the only one who has it, and they know you're the only one who has it.
All right. Well, Jim, thank you so much for talking to us today. And thanks for listening in on today's podcast. And we look forward to you listening to us again in the future. So thank you.